What's up? This is Dan Fredenberg. My microphone's over there, so if I sound like I'm only on one ear, I apologize for that. I suppose I could shift it around a little, but that's not why you're here. I'm here for FIGGERRIDOUT.com and funnelfixing.com, and what I do is I go through one big or difficult concept per day, idea per day, and I tear it to pieces using attention to detail. I'm using a different setup, as you can probably see. It's a little bit too blue on this side. Maybe I'll have to tone that down. Anyway, today's topic is how the Fed works, how the Fed works. And so that's how the Federal Reserve System works. It's a complicated one. It's one that when I wrote it down in my list of subjects, remember the list of subjects, um, I wrote it before lockdown. It was all January, February 2020. I was cognizant of the fact that large asset purchases were being done by the Fed in fall of 2019, and I personally, I can admit it now because it doesn't really matter. I thought it was reckless. I thought it was reckless to be doing that because I thought what was going on was one of two things. I thought that the administration was either trying to fan the economy so that just for political reasons, um, and basically, oh yeah, well, basically, I saw the administration taking credit for the rise in the stock markets and all that kind of fun stuff, even though it was 8 years in the making. Um, so it just made me really suspicious that that was what was going to happen. So I decided to make a little thing about the Fed, because I was talking about all the difficult things that are out there that are extremely difficult to understand. Like I found that even some people who have studied economics and things like that, because they're usually focusing on finding new statistical predictive models and things like that. That's like inside when you study economics, that's how you spend most of your time. And so you don't really have to concern yourself with how exactly the Fed works. Now, back when there was the real estate crash, a lot of people say it's 2008, but as far as like from a building perspective, it was as early as 2006, and 2009 is when the shit really hit the fan. But the Fed was getting a lot of attention at that point, and the reason why they were getting so much attention was because they were basically blaming the Fed for the situation that the world was dealing with, or at least America and therefore the world after that. So, what is the Fed? The Fed is a bank, essentially. It's a central bank. All other countries have a central bank, and they work essentially the same way. The Fed has some of its own quirks. I guess I'll leave the quirks to the end. Uh, but any central bank, the idea is that it's supposed to be some sort of branch of the government, which is why your money always has, like, it doesn't matter what country you're on from, it always has the name of the issuing bank, the issuing central bank. So it'll be like the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, but in the U.S. it's the Federal Reserve. In Taiwan, it's not Bank of Taiwan. I used to remember what the English version of it, because Bank of Taiwan actually has branches, and I believe they are connected to the Kuomintang, which is not the political party that's in power, but it's the political party that was created 109 years ago, I guess, if my memory serves. And that's through Sun Yat-sen and all that kind of stuff. And then Sun Yat-sen and Chiang Kai-shek ended up fleeing China from Nanjing to Taiwan to run away from Mao Zedong's popular movement that ended up in the Communist Party of China. So basically, each different country has a central bank, and that doesn't and people don't have accounts at central banks. That's not how it works. Um, I guess I'll tell the quirks now, so I don't forget the quirks of. And I know that I haven't told you how the Fed works. Don't worry. Um, the quirks of the Fed, as opposed to the other central banks, are that the Fed is actually owned by corporations, I know that JP Morgan owns part of the Fed. Just basically the big ones, you know, they're shareholders, and they've got these weird rules of where they're not allowed to sell shares in the Fed, even though they own it on paper. As far as like, you know, I also have to address why people even talk about the Fed, and some people say, "Oh, the Fed should be banned." So I mentioned there's another video that I recommend checking out, which is the one on Ben Bernanke's book, because that's the best source to find out how this stuff works and why it's justified. Because he also talks about the gold standard and why, and he gave a clear enough explanation to me that I'm a believer, in the sense that I do not think going back to a gold standard or a silver standard or anything like that is a good idea. So those are the quirks of the Federal Reserve. The biggest quirk is that it's on, in theory, it's privately held. So how does it actually work? The Fed is supposed to be the lender of last resort. So the idea is that banks are supposed to borrow from each other, but if banks have no ability to lend to each other, they're supposed to go to the Federal Reserve and get a loan to basically ensure liquidity. So what does that mean? Well, I guess I'll start by making the distinction between wealth and cash. Okay, so the thing is, having a big pile of cash, that's one thing. That's pretty obvious what that's worth. As far as accounting and bookkeeping goes, you have to say, okay, well, what does the person owe as well? In other words, if you have $1 million in cash, but you owe $2 million and it's already due, then it doesn't affect your total balance sheet in such a simple way. You know, you're still in the red. But usually people don't have $1 million just sitting in their banks, even if they do have that sort of wealth. And the reason is because, like, what are you going to do with $1 million all in one shot? You know, whenever money is just sitting there, because of the interest and inflation, it's going to be worth less next year than it is this year. So people always have to deploy the money. They have to invest it in something that'll end up giving them more cash flow, and then the cash flow they can use as their income, or they can reinvest it. But that's neither here nor there. So as far as how the Fed goes, you know, the banks, you know, they've got everybody's wealth, and, you know, they're holding on to, you know, in theory, like all these different mortgages. They have all these different properties that are in other people's names until they stop paying. But if a loan comes due, and then there's, you know, too many unforeseen people who aren't paying up or something like that, we don't want the value of everything to drop like a stone, just because some people are, you know, short for a short period of time. So the people who are setting up the system, the government, the people who set up the Fed, what they decide to do is they wanted to use the Fed. The Fed still prints the money, okay, but where does it come from? Well, basically, if the Fed, or sorry, if a bank wants to borrow money from the Fed in order to loan it to somebody else, which is the only circumstance that somebody's going to be doing a loan from the Fed, from my understanding, what has to happen is, especially because of the was it Dodd-Frank rule, the Volcker rule, or was it Dodd-Frank? I don't remember what the last one was that changed the amount of the deposit that you need to give the Fed in order for them to give you money. So here's your scenario. I got markers. Let's get a blue man, and let's get an orange man. They weren't supposed to be here, but here we go. That's not orange, it's green. Oh, I got a green screen. That's not good. So I am going to use orange. There you go. So orange and blue. All right. So I probably need a third one. That'll be the Fed, black. Okay. So blue person, that's you, decides, hey, I want to buy a house. And let's say it's $100,000. If you want to think in a million, then fine, whatever, it's up to you. So this one says, hey, I want to buy a house, and says, I've only got, okay, so it's $100,000. I've only got 10%. So I've only got 10 grand. and I want to buy $100,000 house. So I go over to the bank and I say, hey, I want to buy this house over there, and here's $10,000, and I need $100,000. Now, let's just say the the bank here says, oh, I've already invested in absolutely everything. I don't have $100,000 to lend you. They can turn around to the Fed and say, yo, I need $100,000. And like, okay, so where's your deposit for that? And say, okay. So he takes the 10 grand from this guy, gives it over to this guy, and says, okay, here's a check for 100 grand. Now, where did it come from? He printed it. It came from nowhere. It came from nowhere at all. And so this is actually one of the key pieces of all of my work on Figure It Out, is explaining this part. Okay. So I already just got through saying that when this guy prints money because of inflation, which is something that this guy's doing on purpose. Okay. Like people have heard of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac before, but like they don't know what they do. Their job, they sound like companies or something, but they're actually, excuse me, they're clever names for government, parts of the government, and they're actually mandated. They have to make a certain amount of loans every single year, and so their whole job, all day, every day, is to make loans, so that the public doesn't have to float all that up, and basically it increases the money supply. Okay, so their literal job is like they have to. It's by law. They have to get a certain number of loans, and if the loans aren't good enough, well, they still have to do it anyway. So like it's like the Fannie Freddie thing. That's a pretty wild thing. But if I get back to this little example of this guy brings 10% to them, that person just drops it in there, and then suddenly they have another 90% of the money that came from nowhere. Well, you still have to pay interest on that money that previously didn't exist. Okay. So like no matter what, this stuff is not free, and it just came from nowhere, and this person's paying the interest and all that kind of stuff. So like it doesn't sound good. Okay. But this is the solution. Before lockdown, and before there was all this emphasis on people, on people, there's all this emphasis on essential workers because of lockdown recently. Before that, I was already talking about essential workers. I was talking about people like farmers and miners. Okay, if you want to have a cell phone or some sort of device, or this computer, this camera I'm talking to you from, you have to mine this stuff out of the ground. Somebody's got to be in a dark hole doing a really shitty job. And why do I call it shitty? Is well, because one, is dark, and two, it's unbelievably dangerous. Especially, I'm from Canada, so we do a lot of hard rock, mining, and so the world is moving, and you're making these caves out of the rock. And the thing is, like, because they're moving, they can shift, and like these things, these holes that we make, it's like ant hills compared to us. Okay, and so just something can happen, and just whoosh, dead. The shaft collapses and kills everybody in it. And no oxygen. It's really, really nasty, horrible situation. And you guys got to pay for it, and the government has to support itself based on all that work going on. So what does that really mean? The reason why, the short reason for getting off of a gold standard or something like that, is because even though people realize that money is just paper or whatever, and they print it all up, the only thing that we really have to make sure happens is like farmers have to, essential workers have to keep going back to work, and they can't eventually say, it's like, hey, wait a second, my job is really hard, I don't want to do this. A lot of people have it a lot easier. Like, like shit, there's some kid on YouTube who's opening toys every day, and basically the advertising money is what's paying for it all. And so the person who's making the most on YouTube in the world, they're making like $22 million a year. Last I heard from 2019, and to open toys and stuff like that. If you know that, and you're out in a farm every day, working your ass off, or or doing things you don't like shoveling shit, or it's look, especially if you're Anglo-Saxon, and you are a little bit prudish about sex, you should find out about how the actual process of how they get livestock to mate, because sometimes it has to be manual, which is like, yeah, no thanks. So uh, it's amazing that people actually do that day in and day out, and we all need them, and it's nice that people are starting to get the amount of respect they deserve for that sort of thing. But the only way that that little situation of where we just print money when somebody asks for it and we do it via a bank and the bank gets the profit, and then but it's all still like monopoly money. um, as long as we keep on accepting that, okay, sure, you know, well, so like in university they like to say it's, oh, money is just a social construct, money's just a social construct, and that's garbage. You can't say it's just a social construct, because it has absolutely real consequences. You know, if I go to the right area of town and I say, hey, see that guy right there, I'll give you $1,000 to beat that guy up, somebody will do it. And even if there's huge inflation, even if everybody goes, oh, you can't even use this cash, you know, it's like $1,000, yeah, like this year, like right now, that's a ton of money. But look at like Argentinians, or um, any of these other places, or like Zimbabwe, where they had this inflation, so that things started costing like $100 trillion, like for like a loaf of bread or something like that. I think 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars last I saw was, it was like less, it was like a buck, something like that. It might have been like 30 cents or something like that. So yeah, they are all just numbers, and if you do enough math and you understand all numbers, and that's what these guys are doing as far as printing more money and keeping you busy and in debt and all that kind of stuff. And the main thing is that you know, the economy has to keep on humming. We have to be able to defend ourselves from other countries that just want to treat us worse than the ones that are already taking our money to call the shots. But what can you do? So, how does the Fed really work? Well, that's how it gets money into the system. And one of the things about you know, since now I'm in real estate, I know how they end up figuring out loans. And if you check out my interviews with the real estate investors in this series, you'll be able to see them say it for themselves. You know, and these are guys who, like, you know, like Tim's got 4,000 units. I know Nick helped him with 1,200 of them. You know, like all these different like big numbers. You know, Daryl's been in his doing construction and all that kind of stuff since he was young. So you can hear how that stuff works, and I emphasize the fact that if they do I guess I'm getting into trickle down economics, because I don't see how you can really discuss this without getting into that. And the way that the Fed becomes a form of trickle down economics is by the fact that they have to find out people who they can actually do the loans to. And the question is, like, if you have two people off the street and say, and basically like the government's saying, okay, we own slash control all the land, and there's an apartment building right there. Let's say that the owners just get hit by a car or something, you know, just they're gone. And well, they have to have somebody own it and take care of it. So the government and the banks are saying, like, okay, so who's going to do it? And if they're choosing between people, either one person who doesn't have a penny to their name and another person who does, it's like, well, they want to protect their investment and make sure that they get their money back that's been dumped into it, because you can dump money into anything and make it disappear. So, like, you know, you could be in a C-class area, which means that it's for people who are struggling. It's not super duper high crime, but it wouldn't be like no crime, that's for sure. Um, so if you're in a C-class area, you know, there's nothing really stopping the landlord from making all the countertops made of granite instead of a laminate, or, you know, like, you can, you know, the like nice stainless steel appliances and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing stopping you from dumping the money into it. But the question is, are you ever going to get the money out of it? I mean, like the question in real estate investors' minds, that's what it is. So the trickle down economics thing from the Fed is that you do have to have a net worth equal to the loan. So like if you're buying a $3 million building, you don't have to be worth $3 million already, but you do have to have somebody in the deal who has a net worth of at least the loan amount. So let's say you get a screaming deal, you're only buying it for 800K. well, you'd still need somebody or a group of people who collectively have that net worth. And so the thing is, like, does that sound fair? Well, in some ways it doesn't, and in other ways it does. So it seems a little bit unfair because it means that, you know, people who want to have a chance and would do a good job, they won't be given that chance. But on the other side is like, well, you know, do you have an alternative? If you do, I'd love to hear it, because, you know, that's kind of what I've been thinking about. It's also, you know, between the pandemic and this, it's also why I didn't go screaming into any deals from doing tech, just because I'm watching where the chips fall a little bit. So right now we're you know, we're doing buy and holds and stuff like that. But you know, like my holdings are minimal in anything like that right now. So, but you know, that's why I partner with the guys who, you know, they already have skin in the game. So, really, at the end of the day, to recap how the Fed works, it basically, it prints money. It also destroys money. It also sets lending terms and the base interest rate. So the base interest rate is like, okay, so if you borrow through us, you're going to be paying this interest rate. But if you can make something work with another bank, that's better, you're supposed to do that first. And you're supposed to go through your depositors and private lenders that you have first before you go to the Fed. But the real idea is they don't want to print too much money because they have these inflation targets. They try not to go past them. And the way that they do that is by saying, okay, well, what they do is they do asset purchases. I'm glad I almost ended without mentioning asset purchases, and that'd be a disaster. So asset purchases, what they'll do is they'll do printed money to increase the amount of cash that's in the system. So in that system here where I had, I don't know where my orange marker is there. I remember that was the bank. Blue was you. Okay, so these guys, you know, like, it's all funny money for them. Okay, like they can just they can go ahead and print it. But one thing that'll happen is, like, if not enough borrowers, that's these guys, are coming to the banks, then these guys are saying, it looks like we're not having as much growth as usual. So since they have, so let's say this is after the loan. Okay, so this guy here already gave the 10 grand to this bank, and that 10 grand went to this, went to the Fed. So, so they put it on their balance sheet saying, okay, so like we put out 100 grand and we're holding 10 grand for it. So these guys are humming along trying to do all their business, and these guys are watching how much growth is going on in the actual country. So these guys, if they start to go, you know, we're showing some weakness in, you know, like the job numbers, or this or that, or whatever, you know, maybe there's going to be more oil produced, or just anything like that, or maybe there's a war or a virus. They say, well, we need to make sure that inflation still happens and we have that growth. So what they start doing is saying, like, okay, well, another one, let's do it red, boink. Here's the treasury. The treasury and the Fed are not the same thing. Okay, the treasury is definitely part of the government, and the idea is that the Fed is supposed to be as limited in its involvement in the government as possible. So the thing is, what the Fed will do is it'll buy treasuries. What's a treasury? It's like, okay, well, this person here, only a richer version, I guess, decides, okay, I got some extra money. And well, actually, I guess the banks are probably the best example. When the bank gives money, like deposits money in the Fed, they have a choice. It can either be cash, or it can be like a treasury or something like that instead, or it can be gold. Those are the three things that are generally considered, you know, it's like, okay, you can't even argue the value of those things. So the bank, you know, you can get the 10 grand from the bank, and then the bank can choose either to give the 10 grand in cash, or 10 grand in gold, or it can be 10 grand in treasuries, or different federal bonds and stuff like that. So what the Fed can do, though, if there's not enough cash out there, it's like, okay, these guys have their bonds and all that kind of stuff, but they need more cash in the system. Well, what they can do is these guys can buy bonds from either directly from the Fed or directly from the bank. I don't know if they do it from private people. I'm sure you'd have to be pretty freaking rich. Like, you'd have to be super duper loaded. You know, I mean, I bet you'd have to be like a billionaire at least before these guys would even talk to you to buy some of your bonds off of you. The idea is just to get more cash into the system. And when more cash is in the system, then people are like, all right, yay, let's buy all that stuff that we wanted. Yay, all that kind of stuff. So, so that's asset purchases. And so the thing is, if the bank sheet gets, if the balance sheet of the Fed gets way too big, then you have the worry that people are going to say, hey, wait a second, this stuff's just paper. I can't believe I'm actually spending 40 hours of my week every week, or if you're an entrepreneur, you know, it might be 80, however many hours per week. And I'm only getting this, you know, like this is crazy, you know, this paper. Now, of course, you use the paper to eat, and if you like eating, you'll still be game for that. But if you have another way to get fed without getting paid, then, you know, if it's going to be less work, they're going to do that. So that's how the Fed really works at the end of the day. And I don't think I missed that much of the important bits. So I hope that really helped. I hope, and please do comment or ask any questions if you have any of that. But why am I even talking about the Fed when almost nobody cares? Well, the reason is because I'm putting out one video per day for 366 days at least. And I'm using attention to detail to rip them apart. If you want to know more about that kind of stuff, you can check out Figure It Out, the Attention to Detail Handbook. You can see that it doesn't like my background because it's green. But anyway, so yeah, this is a yucky copy because I've been holding it for almost 250 videos. But this whole, like the main idea is like, if you have to start from zero, I found that attention to detail is the best way to help you in your career or your business. Now, you don't have to get the print version like this. The link is in the description. The audiobook version is the most popular of this. Yeah, you can see that the background is taking over because this is my last apartment in Taiwan, but I haven't lived in Taiwan for 3 years, so that's what that is. So that book there, it's nice because it takes the idea of attention to detail and why I'm saying it's so important. It wraps that up in a nice little bow, so you can check that out. That's a good one. But if you want something else to read, there is Eat Your Boss's Lunch. Okay, this one here is about how to start your own business, doing what you're already doing at work. And most people, they can't find a way to make that work. And the other thing too is they don't really understand boss mentality. One of the biggest things is bosses will be like, oh, well, you know, you can't compete with me directly. You know, that's not nice. It's like, but that's exactly what the boss did. It's exactly what the boss did. Either they learned it from their parents or they learned it from somebody else and started doing it themselves. And they're trying to use these fake moral arguments to control you. It's really bad stuff. But anyway, this is a book for a buck. Eat Your Boss's Lunch. It was about how, you know, I got into tech, and then I was in sales and support. And then what I ended up doing was saying, well, wait a second, you know, like every single person who gets on my phone, they would always be looking for somebody to handle the website and tech of their e-commerce part. So I was like, okay, well, I already know a little bit of HTML, and I know I can learn how to program fast enough because I had to do it in college with Java and whatever, but I didn't know any HTML. Well, I knew a tiny bit of HTML back then. But I was like, okay, well, I'll help you out because I'm busy telling these guys, you know, who are charging, you know, $60, $80 an hour, $100 an hour for shopping cart help. I'm telling them how to do it. So it was like, why don't I just do it for myself? So that's what I did in Eat Your Boss's Lunch. The digital version of this is a book for a buck. You can see that also in the description. It's got a nice picture on the back there too. What else? Funnelfixing.com is IT services, ad spending. You know, basically we can go through your funnels or we can create brand new ones. Weird stutter there. Last but not least, I am in commercial real estate, and we're always looking for distressed properties. So what does that mean? If you see that the grass isn't being cut, if they're not taking care of your building at all, I got a link down in the description to try and help you out with that. But I'll be here again tomorrow, and I do hope that you like and subscribe and share and all that kind of stuff. We're starting to get a nice little crowd of regular watchers, and don't think for one second that I don't appreciate you tuning in. I don't want you to feel obliged to tune in. in the sense that you don't have to consume all of this kind of stuff, because a lot of it's not for anybody. One of the things that gave me the confidence to actually start putting out these videos was, even if you're one in a million, there's 7 billion people on Earth. So that means there's 7,000 of you. So I don't actually think I'm one in a million, but you don't even have to be exactly like me. Even if you're just like part of me, then hopefully this stuff will work out for you. One thing you might want to take a look at, if you're in YouTube, take a look at the playlists. And if you're in Facebook, in the Facebook group with all of these videos, the sidebar, I just categorized all the different videos. So that way you can, like, if you're only interested when I talk about stuff like this, which you could say it's business, you could say it's politics, it's definitely not religion. Whatever videos that you actually enjoy, you can see them right there. Anyway, I'll be here tomorrow, and I hope you will be too. See ya.